There was a time when the boys genuinely felt fresh, not in the fake, mature superhero content the way most shows try to market themselves as. It felt fresh because underneath all the gore, profanity, and chaos, there was actually fear inside the writing. But what went wrong with the later seasons? Let's find out.
I offer oblivion.
Season 1 of The Boys understood something very important. If superhero existed in the real world, they would not become symbol of hope, rather they would become products and weapons or celebrities and political tools. And the scariest part was not the powers themselves, it was the corporation controlling them. And that is why Season 1 worked so brilliantly. The show felt grounded emotionally. Every violent movement had its weight because the world itself still felt believable. When Adrian kills Robin in the very first episode, the scene is horrifying not because of the blood or its absurdness, but because Huey suddenly realized that normal people mean absolutely nothing in a world controlled by untouchable celebrities and corporations. Even Homelander in season 1 feels different compared to the later seasons. He was terrifying because of his unpredictability. The show didn't constantly throw him into giant speeches or exaggerated public breakdowns. Sometimes the scariest thing about Homelander was simply watching him smile while clearly thinking about something horrible. There was restraint in the writing, and the way Antony Starr played this character was truly amazing. For example, the airplane scene perfectly captures why early seasons of The Boys was so effective. The scene is disturbing because Homelander still understands optics. He still wants to appear heroic even while abandoning innocent people. The monster exists, but the monster still hides behind all that performance. That balance made him fascinating. Season 1 also balanced satire far more intelligently than later seasons. The corporate commentary worked because it felt observational instead of desperate for reactions. What felt believable because it resembled actual corporations. The PR campaigns, fake inclusivity, commercialized heroism, and media manipulation, all of that felt uncomfortably close to reality. And most importantly, the characters still felt human. Huey was grieving for his girlfriend's death that was killed by A-Train. Butcher was consumed by hatred for Homelander and all other soups, and Starlight still believed that goodness could survive inside corruption. The emotional core of the story mattered, and the spectacle served the story. And honestly, I think season 2 is where The Boys reached its peak. Because season 2 took everything that worked out about the first season and expanded it without completely losing control. Stormfront remains one of the smartest additions of the show ever made because she represented a different kind of horror than Homelander. Homelander wanted love and control, but Stormfront wanted ideological control. And what made her character so unsettling was how realistically the show portrayed online radicalization. She understood how modern extremism works. She weaponized humor, memes, and internet culture to slowly normalize hate, which happens in real life too. That was genuinely sharp writing, and unlike later seasons, the satire still trusted the audience. The show wasn't constantly screaming its political parallels directly into the camera, it allowed viewers to recognize them naturally. Season 2 also still cared about character progression. Homelander's insecurity deepened, Huey became more confident, Starlight started losing faith in institutions, and even Butcher slowly revealed how much pain existed underneath all his anger. The emotional arcs were still moving forward, and because of that, the chaos felt meaningful. Even the violence still worked during the season because it had consequences attached to it. Whenever someone died or suffered, it still affected the narrative emotionally. Nothing felt purely designed for internet reactions yet. But then came season 3, and this is where the cracks started becoming visible.
I don't make mistakes. I'm not just like the rest of you. I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better. I am better.
Now, to be very clear, season 3 is still entertaining. In fact, I think that entertainment is exactly what distracted people from realizing the story had quietly stopped progressing. Because this season introduced one of the biggest long-term problems with The Boys, and that is repetition, especially with the character of Homelander. Every season started following the same structure, that Homelander almost loses control, that Homelander almost gets exposed, and Homelander almost changes society forever. And then the story reset itself just enough to continue another season. The tension around the plot stopped evolving, and once the audience realizes the show is scared of permanent consequences, fear slowly disappears from the storytelling. Soldier Boy's character introduction really helped hide this issue for a while because Jensen Ackles brought enormous charisma to this role. The character immediately became one of the most entertaining part of the series. But underneath all that entertainment, the narrative itself had become strangely circular. Characters kept revisiting the same emotional conflicts, like Butcher is still struggling with his obsession towards Homelander and how to kill him, whereas Francie is still struggling with his past guilt and Kimiko is still struggling with her identity. The story moved, but emotionally, many characters stayed trapped in one place. And this is also where the show's obsession with escalation started becoming more obvious. Heroism is probably the perfect example. Now, visually and conceptually, that episode is insane. It became a huge internet movement, everybody talked about it. But that is also when I start noticing the show becoming increasingly aware of its own reputation. Now it always wanted to constantly shock audiences and eventually shock value became part of the brand itself. But the problem with shock value is that it only works temporarily. The more a show tries to escalate constantly, the less disturbing anything becomes. Violence turns into routine, chaos turns into aesthetic, and slowly, emotional impact gets replaced by reaction culture. That problem becomes impossible to ignore in season 4 because this is where the boys start feeling less like a satire and more like a show reacting to social media in real time.
You'll no longer be beloved celebrities. You will be wrathful gods.
Earlier seasons observed culture, but season 4 imitates internet noise. Scenes stopped feeling natural and started feeling engineered for clips, memes, and online discourse. The writing became louder but less intelligent. And honestly, this is the saddest part of the show's downfall because you can still see the flashes of brilliance underneath everything. Antony Starr is still incredible as Homelander. He gives his best. In fact, he somehow becomes even more disturbing because by this point, the character no longer feels interested in hiding his impulses. But again, the story itself struggles to move him forward in meaningful ways because Homelander became too valuable, not just as a character, but as the identity of franchise itself. And once the show became dependent on maintaining a character instead of progressing them, the storytelling part inevitably start collapsing inward. The satire also loses its subtlety completely by this point. Earlier seasons trusted viewers to understand the political commentary. Now the show practically pauses to make sure everyone online notices the reference, and because of that, many emotional scenes lose authenticity. The show became self-aware in the wrong way. It started performing its own reputation, and even the violence changed its tonality. Earlier, the gore felt horrifying because it exposed how fragile human bodies would actually be around superpowered individuals. Now, many scenes only exist primarily because the audience expects absurdity from the boys, and eventually, spectacle without restraint become exhausting instead of shocking. But strangely enough, despite all these problems, I still don't think the ending of The Boys is completely meaningless. I mean, I really like the scene where Homelander was begging for his life to Butcher because he really deserved it. But all that scene before that eventually led to that final scene was quite disappointing. At the beginning of the series, Homelander hides his true nature because society still expects morality from powerful people. By the end, he realizes something terrifying, that he no longer needs to pretend and people will support him anyway. That is the real horror of The Boys, not the superheroes, but the normalization of the superheroes. The audience inside the show slowly becomes just as disturbing as the people they worship. Violence becomes entertainment, cruelty becomes identity, and fear becomes politics. And eventually, truth itself stops mattering as long as someone makes people feel powerful. This is why the ending feels uncomfortable, not because evil wins or it is a all good ending, but because society slowly adjusts itself around evil until it starts looking normal. Which is why the downfall of The Boys feels more disappointing instead of forgettable, because the show still had something meaningful buried underneath all the excess. It just slowly became consumed by the same thing it originally criticized: corporate franchisee culture, endless escalation, spectacle over substance. And The Boys did not collapse overnight. It simply became louder season after season until eventually the noise started drowning out the story itself. And maybe that is the most ironic ending possible for a show that once warned us about entertainment becoming emptier the bigger it gets. So that's it for the video. What are your thoughts about the finale of the season? Let me know in the comment section, and please like the video and subscribe this channel for more cinema related content. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay nerdy and watch good films.
You're all fucking welcome.